So, good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to this masterclass. And the aim is basically that I should be able to remove those last minute worries and last minute stress before the exam. And all of you are here. I believe that all of you are probably giving the July part one MRCG exam. So let's make this webinar more interactive. And if you have any queries, please do put it on chat. The agenda for today is first, I'll be discussing some tips and tricks how you should go about with your MRCG exam. This will be followed by a quiz session. And again, I would request all of you to participate in that. We also have some exciting prizes for the winners. Following which, we'll have discussion of two high yield topics today. One is the ROC curve and the other is the Gillick's competence. Again, very important from perspective of your MRCG part 1. Most of you must be in the revision phase right now because the exam is just approaching. So we'll have that's all for today. And I think let's start with the webinar. So all of you are already aware of the curriculum for part 1. So basically, why I want to emphasize this slide again is that you will have questions from all these subjects. So part 1 is basically the test of basic sciences. So basic sciences applicable to the field of obstetrics and gynecology. So it is more of integrated learning, how physiology applies to obstetrics and gynecology, how pathology applies, how microbiology applies, how anatomy applies, how embryology applies. So you will not have much of clinical questions per se in the subject of obstetrics and gynae, but it'll be more of test of your basic knowledge, because the problem is MRCUG or the UK, the Royal Colleges, they don't recognize the degrees of the immigrants. So to ensure that they are capable of practicing in their country, they conduct this MRCUG exam. And the part 1 is basically test of your basic sciences. So my tip to all of you would be that you make sure that each of the subjects, like don't leave any subject. Even if you cannot complete 100% one subject, you must have coverage of all the subjects. So even if you cannot cover one subject completely, make sure that you have covered all the subjects, because it is never possible to cover one subject completely, but covering all the subjects is important, because from each of the subjects you will be having some questions. So make sure. Now, all of you who are doing this already, please write Y in the chat. Those who are not doing so can write N or no. So request all of you to write a Y if you are already doing that. Wonderful, wonderful. I'm getting lots of Ys now. So I'm also getting N. So that is not a good thing to happen. Now you have 1 week. So make sure you have addressed all the subjects. So wonderful. Most of you are doing that. That is wonderful. So this is just to give you a glimpse of the syllabus which is covered in MRCG Part 1. Again, most of you, I believe, already must be either MD or you must be doing your MD. You must have done your MD. So you already have a knowledge base in the specialty of obstetrics and gynecology. I believe so. So all these modules, they, I think, should be a cakewalk for all of you. So can you write your qualifications in the chat? So I know how many are pursuing their MD, how many have done their MD. If you're pursuing your MD, you can write the year. If you've already done, you can mention that yes, MD completed. Pursuing final year, completed, just completed. Wonderful. So I see there is a mix of most of you are completed or you are in your final year or third year. So very few first year or second years. My advice would be that when you enter your MD, you should start also preparing for your MRCUG exam, because part 2 can be given by till the time you have finished your MD. Because anyway, they don't require clinical knowledge. Wonderful. So again, this is to focus on the key areas we've already discussed. Now make sure you have 1 week of time to revise all these subjects, especially anatomy, embryology, genetics. So it becomes important for all of you to go through these subjects. You will have questions from biostatistics, endocrinology, physiology, pharmacology, lab interpretation. Don't forget, because they may give you scenarios wherein they may give you acid base balance, they may give you electrolyte levels, and you have to manage the patient, or they may give you parameters like FSH level is so much, LH level is so much, and they may ask you estradiol level is so much, what is the diagnosis or how will you manage the patient. So you should have a slight idea about the range, the normal ranges as well. So this is something very basic. I am sure that all of you know about it, that there are two papers for MRCG part 1. Each will be having 100 SPAs. So paper 1 is 2.5 hours. Paper 2 is also 2.5 hours, and there's an 1 hour break in between. So this becomes almost 6 hours. So make sure that you are fresh when you go for the exam. Talking about the structure of the SPA. So as all of you, I think this is again very basic. So I'm sure all of you know the structure of an SPA, how SPA looks like. Please put a Y if you know how the structure of an SPA is. Put an N if you, I don't think there'll be anybody with N, but put a Y if you know the structure of an SPA. So yes, everybody, that's what I expected, and all of you already know what an SPA is like. But just to, for the sake of completion, an SPA has a clinical stem. Clinical stem means there'll be a scenario where they'll describe what the scenario is. Then there'll be a lead-in question. What are you expected to answer? And then you'll have 5 options. So sometimes, now remember that an SPA means, okay, again, a very basic question. What does an SPA stand for? Please put it on the chat. What does the SPA stand for? Yes, surely it is the single best answer. So, when you're given the 5 options, there might be some places where 2 or 3 options, they are very close. But out of those, you have to choose the best one. So you might feel that option A can also be the answer, option B can also be the answer, and because they're asking for the best, so make sure that you look at all the options and then you decide which one is the best. Again, this is an example question, so you can see that this whole thing is the clinical scenario from here to here, which says that a 68-year-old hypertensive woman is being evaluated, and she's taking thiazide diuretics for blood pressure control for over a decade. Her pre-op ECG shows flattened T wave, prominent U waves, ST depression, and prolonged PR interval. So she is asymptomatic at present. So what is the likely biochemical abnormality? So this is the lead-in question. These are the options. And as you know, the answer in this case is hypokalemia. Okay, so what they say is the best method of solving an SPA. Wonderful. I've got a very intelligent audience and a very inquisitive audience, very interactive audience. Thank you very much for participating and answering. So what is the best method of solving SPAs? As per the literature and as per the books, they say the best method for solving an SPA is the cover test. So what you do in the cover test is you just with your hand cover all the options. You read the question, the lead-in, and you read the stem, and you read the lead-in question, and then you think of the answer in your mind. Once you've mentally thought of the answer, then you look at the options. This way, if you have thought of the option in your mind and it is there in the answer, that means that is the correct answer. And suppose what you have thought about is not there in the options, then you read the options carefully one by one, and also ensure that you read all the options. It is very important to read all the options, because as I mentioned previously, that there may be some, you have to choose the best answer. So there might be 2 or 3 options which may be applicable or which may be right. for that particular question, but you need to choose the best answer. So, how many of you are already using this cover test when you are trying to solve the SPAs? Again, write yes for those who are using this cover test. So wonderful. Those of who are not using the cover test, I advise you to please use this cover test. It is quite beneficial because it will help you reach the correct answer very quickly. It is also important to have a study plan before you. I know it is too late now, but you still have 7 8 days left before the exam. So you can develop a study plan, and maybe you can just revise each subject, which I spoke about in my initial slides. Maybe you can keep 1 day or maybe half a day for each of the subject. You can just go through right now is not the time to build the concepts. But right now is the time to maybe solve as many SPAs, as many mock papers as you can. This is the best time. Try solving as many mock papers. Try attempting the flashcards. Don't try to read extensive theory right now. It will not be of any use. Because what is there at the back of your mind, the concepts which you have built. I also understand most of you are already MD or you are in your second or third year or your final year. So you already have the knowledge. You already have it in you. It is just that you have to apply it in the exam. So the best thing right now would be you just practice to orient yourself. And if you practice the mock papers, then what happens is on the day of the exam, you will not be under stress because you've already done it. If you time yourself for a mock paper, I told you it's a extensive exam, it is 6 hours long. So if you time yourself with the mock paper, you attempt paper one in 2.5 hours, then you take 1 hour break, then again you attempt paper two. If you have done several of mock papers before your actual exam, that practice will help you a lot because you'll be completely stress free during your exam. And because you would not be worried about time management or anything, because your mind will know that, oh, I've done this so many times, I'll be able to manage. No problems. So, this will, because what is important before the exam is knowledge, I'm sure all of you have. It's basically that you did not give in to stress because it was a stressful time, the examination time. Your mind did not give in to stress. That is the most important thing which is required to pass an exam, and especially something like MRCOG. So again, focus study, which we spoke about, that maybe you can devote. You have 7 days. You can devote maybe 4 5 hours per day for each depends on how many hours you can study in a day. So maybe the morning time you can keep for one subject, the evening time you can keep for another subject, something like that, and you can cover all the subjects. Try solving as many mock papers. Stay motivated. Think of what you are aiming for. Think of the MRCG degree. Again, patience and persistence, they always help. You need to be very very patient and persistent. Even if you feel that when you're solving the question papers and you feel you don't know the answers, you keep solving it. It will help you. Be persistent. Again, what is also important is in the exam you get nearly 8 to 10 image based questions. So it is important that whenever you are studying, you also try to memorize or you try to study the images when you are studying for this exam, because these are also high scoring, because if you know them, you know them. And some of them might be related to maybe say ultrasound interpretation, chest x-ray, ECG interpretation, the regular ones. Some maybe a little tricky, like maybe they might give you some embryology question. But overall, if you know the thing, and again you use logic, and to be able to use logic, it is important that you've had a good night's sleep and your mind is absolutely fresh. Because again, when you're fresh and your mind is active, that time, even those things which you may have studied maybe 5 years back or 4 years back, they'll come back to you. So it is important to have a very good night's sleep. So if you follow all these tips which I've just mentioned, I'm sure you'll pass with flying colors. So some tips regarding time management. So there is a very classical technique, the Pomodoro's technique, which is advice that you should follow before any stressful exam. And that basically involves that you divide your study time into 25 minutes each and you take small breaks. So if you study for 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute break, then again you study for 25 minutes. So at least 4 times you study for 25 minutes, and this should be followed by short breaks. And these are the Pomodoros. These each work related, this thing is known as a Pomodoro. And after 4 Pomodoros, they say that you should take a long break. This helps in also increasing your memory retention power, and it also keeps you fresh and energized. So how many of you are following this technique? Is anybody following this technique? Yes, lots of you are following this technique. Wonderful. So just to kind of make you more active, we have a interactive quiz session for you, and this will also be having interesting prizes. So I'll pass on the session to my colleague, Dr. Neha. She'll take you through the quiz session. And for this, I would encourage you to join the quiz and to attempt it as much as possible. So Neha, I'm stop sharing. You can share your screen.
Yes, ma'am.
You can scan this QR code and you'll be able to attempt the quiz.
We will wait for 5 minutes so that everyone can join. Kindly scan the QR code which you can see on the left hand side of your screen, or you can join at ahaslice.com/bgk5h. Okay, let me start the quiz. So the first question is, which of the following does not originate from the Whitland vein? You can see the options on your screen. Kindly mark the answer. Prompt responses give you a higher score. So the correct answer is inferior mesenteric vein, and 8 people have answered it correctly. Let's move to the leaderboard. Dr. Sam is leading the leading position. Let's move to the next question. What is the most appropriate treatment for a woman of recurrent vulvovaginal candidiasis? The options are visible on the screen. Kindly mark your answers. So 24 people have answered it correctly, oral fluconazole. Let's move to the leaderboard. Now Dr. Ruth is leading the leaderboard. Let's move to next question. In a trial of a new therapeutic agent, the required sample size varies with which of the following? The options are visible on your screen. Kindly mark the answer. So 18 have done it correctly. This is level of statistical significance required. Let's see the leaderboard. Dr. Akshi has moved to the top spot in the leaderboard, and Akshi Garg is rocking the longest streak. So the next question is, which among the following statements is not a feature of Wolffian duct? Kindly mark your answer. So 5 have marked it correctly. This is actually the whole ureter. Let's see the leaderboard. Dr. Divyanka is leading the leaderboard now and is rocking the longest streak. Let's move to the other question. A 32-year-old woman who is 25 weeks pregnant presents with vaginal bleeding and cramping lower abdominal pain. On examination, the cervix is closed. Fetal cardiac activity is noted on ultrasound. What is the likely diagnosis? It's antepartum hemorrhage, and 11 have correctly marked it. Let's see the leaderboard. Dr. Divyanka is rocking the longest streak, and Dr. Devika is leading the leaderboard. Next question. A G2 para 1 woman with 145 by 96 mm Hg blood pressure comes to a clinic at 35 weeks of gestation. She gives a negative history of proteinuria. Which one of the following is the correct next step of management for gestational hypertension in this case? Kindly mark the answers. Prompt responses will lead to a higher score. Yeah, it's oral labetalol, and 21 people have marked it correctly. Let's see the leaderboard. Dr. Divyanka is rocking the longest streak, and Dr. Devika is leading the leaderboard. So the next question is, which of the following enzymes controls the rate limiting step in the glycolysis pathway? Kindly mark your answers. So 19 have marked it correctly. It's phosphofructokinase. Let's see the leaderboard. Dr. Divyanka is rocking the longest streak, but now Dr. Swastika is leading the leaderboard. Now, the tumor marker beta HCG is the most commonly used to diagnose which of the following types of cancers? Everyone has marked it correctly. This is choriocarcinoma. Let's see the leaderboard. Dr. Didi is rocking the longest streak, and Dr. Swastika is leading the leaderboard. You are organizing a VQ scan for a pregnant patient who is being investigated for shortness of breath. Which of the following is the commonest teratogenic effect of exposure to high-dose radiation? 10 have marked it correctly. Its central nervous system changes. Let's see the positions in the leaderboard. Now Dr. Nidhi is rocking the longest streak and Dr. Divyanka is leading the leaderboard. Prompt responses can lead to a higher score. So kindly mark your answers quickly. Is Gartner's duck cyst originates from a residual structure from early fetal development? Which of the following is it derived from? Kindly mark your answer. "22 have marked it correctly. It's Wolfen ducks in females. Let's see the leaderboard. Dr. Nidhi is rocking the longest streak and Dr. Divyanka is at the top spot in the leaderboard. Which of the following statements regarding the anatomical boundaries or contents of the femoral triangle is correct? Kindly mark your answers. "15 have marked it correctly. The medial boundary of the femoral triangle is formed by the adductor. Dr. Nidhi is rocking the longest streak and Dr. Swastika is now leading the leaderboard. A 65-year-old postmenopausal woman with prior vaginal hysterectomy and pelvic floor repair presents with pelvic pressure and a bulge. On exam, the vaginal vault is at the level of the hymen. What is the POPQ stage of prolapse? The 21 have marked it correctly is stage 2. Let's see the positions on the leaderboard. Dr. Nidhi is rocking the longest streak, but now Dr. Kabila is leading the leaderboard. Let's move to the next question. Which of the following best describes the physiological change in the maternal cardiovascular system during normal pregnancy? So 14 have marked it correctly. Its heart rate increases by approximately 20%. Let's see the leaderboard. Dr. Nidhi is still rocking the longest streak, but now Dr. Divyanka is leading the leaderboard. Let's move to next question. A 62-year-old postmenopausal woman is undergoing evaluation for increasing abdominal distension. Pelvic ultrasound reveals a unilateral multiloculated ovarian cyst measuring 5 cm and her serum CA-125 level is 150 IU per ml. What is her RMI? "11 have marked it correctly. It's 450. Let's see the leaderboard. Dr. Nidhi is rocking the longest streak, but now Dr. Divyanka is leading the leaderboard. Which of the following vulval dermatosis carries the highest risk of malignant transformation? Kindly mark your answers. Quick responses will also lead to a higher score. 23 have marked it correctly. It's lichen sclerosis. Let's see the leaderboard. Dr. Nidhi is rocking the longest streak and Dr. Divyanka is leading the leaderboard. Let's move to next question. Which of the following teratogen abnormality pairings is correctly matched? So everyone has marked it correctly. It's diethylstilbestrol leads to vaginal clear cell adenocarcinoma. Let's see the leaderboard. Dr. Nidhi is rocking the longest streak and Dr. Divyanka is leading the leaderboard. So the next question is, a 25-year-old woman undergoes her first routine cervical smear test and experiences discomfort during the procedure. Which of the following nerves carries the efferent sensory fibers from the cervix to the upper sacral spinal segments? So 14 have marked it correctly. It's pelvic splenic nerve. Let's move to the leaderboard. Dr. Didi is now rocking the longest streak and Dr. Divyanka is leading the leaderboard. Let's move to next question. Which of the following best defines the process of compaction during early embryonic development? So 18 have marked it correctly. It's cellular adhesion leading to the morula stage after the 16 cell stage. Let's see the positions on the leaderboard. Dr. Didi is rocking the longest streak. Oh, Dr. Chaya has now leading the leaderboard. Question is, a full-term female neonate born by spontaneous vaginal delivery in a region with a high prevalence for tuberculosis received the BCG vaccine shortly after birth. Which of the following best describes the type of vaccine that BCG represents? So 26 have answered it correctly. It's live vaccine. Let's see the leaderboard. Dr. Didi is rocking the longest streak and Dr. Chaya is leading the leaderboard. So this is the last question. Which of the following is an aim of clinical audit? Kindly mark your answers. Twenty-six have marked it correctly. It's to assess the extent to which current practice meets a defined set of. So Dr. Didi holds the longest streak and Dr. Chaya has been the winner for this quiz.
Congratulations, Dr. Chaya. So, Dr. Chaya, you can hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you, ma'am.
So, you are the winner. Congratulations.
Thank you, ma'am.
You are attempting the part 1 exam in July.
Yes, ma'am.
So that makes you very confident that you will be able to pass the exam.
Not very confident, but definitely my spirits have lifted up, ma'am.
That's wonderful. So, how are your preparations going?
It's good, I guess, ma'am.
You are working somewhere right now. You are doing your PG. You have done your PG.
I've done my PG, ma'am. I'm currently working as an assistant professor in a medical college, ma'am.
So, where are you based?
Andhra Pradesh, ma'am.
Okay, wonderful. So, right now you are also working, or you have taken leave for your exams?
Just 2 days, ma'am. I've taken leave. That's it. I'm working.
I know you don't get too much leave.
Yes, ma'am.
That was the same problem I also faced, that you don't get the leaves. But how do you plan to, what tips maybe you would want to share? How is your study plan going? What do you plan
Mm,
to do towards the end? You want to,
yeah, I have my notes and I have essential revision guide with me, ma'am.
Hmm.
So before the exam, I just want to go through everything once and go through the recall questions.
Yeah, wonderful. I think that's the best strategy.
Thank
So,
you, ma'am.
uh, congratulations to you, and our team will get connected with you for the prize and everything.
Thank you, ma'am.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay. All the best.
Thank you, ma'am.
May you pass with flying colors. You will, I'm sure you will.
That means a lot, ma'am.
Now that the quiz is over, we'll start with the discussion of the hide facts. And the first topic for today. Before that, if there are any queries, I can address it. Or I can even address it towards the end. But if you have some queries related to the questions, also you can put it. Otherwise, I'll start with the discussion. So the first topic I've chosen, the high topic, is the ROC curve, because I've realized that lots of students, they face difficulty in understanding what is an ROC curve. Again, statistics is something which I know at this stage most of us have forgotten about it, because we probably read it during our SPM days and we are not aware of. Now we don't remember the basics of statistics, but this is something, if you spend maybe a week in studying statistics, and because the questions, they are very high scoring, and you will surely have 5 6 questions pertaining to statistics. So if your statistics is clear, you will be able to attempt those questions very well. And the topic where I see many students, they come asking for help, is the ROC curve. So ROC curve, it stands for the receiver operating characteristic curve. And this is basically a graphical tool, or it is basically in form of a graph or in form of a image, which helps us in evaluating how well a test is able to distinguish between two groups. So what are these two groups? The two groups is one group which is with the condition or the disease, and the other group is without the disease. So basically, how to differentiate between these two groups? How well the test is able to differentiate between these two groups is what an ROC curve tells us. So ROC curve will have a y-axis and it will have an x-axis. So y-axis basically represents the true positive rate. So this is the y-axis you can see, and this stands for the true positives. So true positive is also the sensitivity. And the x-axis basically stands for false positives, or it stands for 1 minus the specificity. So the curve is higher and it is closer to the left-hand side means this is the best scenario possible. Why this is the best scenario possible? Because the best scenario would be when the test is here. If the test is here, what does that mean? It means the test is 100% sensitive and it is 100% specific. What do you mean by sensitivity? Sensitivity is probability of the test to be positive in those who have the disease. This is what is sensitivity. So how do you calculate sensitivity? The probability of the test to be positive in those who have the disease. So that means it is true positive divided by who are the ones who have the disease. The true positives and the false negatives are also those who have the disease. That is what is sensitivity. So if the sensitivity is 100%, that means false negative is 0. Okay, that is what this situation here would be representing. And if we talk about what is specificity, specificity is the probability of the test to be negative in those who do not have the disease. So how do you calculate specificity? It is true negative divided by who are the ones who do not have the disease. Please answer on the chat. Who are the ones who do not have the disease? True negatives plus what else? False positives are also the ones who do not have the disease. So if the test is 100% specific, that means the false positives will be 0 almost or very less. And again, that is what this situation will represent here in the ROC curve, that the test which is 100% specific, that means the false positive is 0, and it is 100% sensitive, that means the false negative is almost 0. Also, you have to take into consideration the area under the curve. So area under the curve basically means if you consider this graph, then you can see the entire thing. If you consider it as the area under the curve, that is equal to 1, the entire area. So this blue curve will represent the highest area under the curve, and this green graph will represent a little less than 1. And this, the dotted red line which you are seeing, will represent about 0.5, which is considered as a random classifier, and that means the test is not at all accurate. It is as good as tossing a coin. So if you come here, so the overall accuracy of the test, the closer it is to 1, the better is the test. And the diagonal line, as we just saw, it represents 0.5 area under the curve. So this represents random guessing. This is as good as tossing a coin. So might as well toss a coin rather than use a test to understand if the patient has the disease or doesn't have the disease. So the clinical relevance is that it basically helps us in developing a cutoff value, and it helps us in balancing the sensitivity and specificity of a test. So we can decide the accuracy of the test based on the sensitivity and specificity. If the ROC is nearing the left-hand side, then you know that it is more accurate. And if the area under the curve is nearing 1, you know it is more accurate. And you should probably use it in your study population to distinguish between those people who have the disease from those people who do not have the disease. So there's a question for you. A new serum biomarker is being evaluated for its ability to predict preterm births. The ROC curve for this test yields an AUC of 0.87. Which of the following is the best interpretation of this result? So you have the options, which is the best interpretation of an ROC curve, which is having an AUC of 0.87. So please answer on chat. Yes, we are having the correct option is D. And D is basically the test has a high ability to correctly classify individuals with and without the disease. In this case, it is the ability to predict the preterm birth. We mentioned that if it is nearing 1, then that means the test is excellent. If it is between 0.8 to 0.9, it is good. 0.7 to 8, it is fair. 0.5, there is no discrimination which will be occurring between those with the disease or those without the disease. So it is as good as random guessing. So an AUC of 0.87 comes in this range. It is not excellent, but it is having a good overall diagnostic performance. So the next, the high topic which I will be taking today is Gillick's competence. And this is the reason of taking this is specific to the UK scenario. And what does Gillick competence basically stand for? So this is basically a legal principle which is used in UK to determine whether a child who is under the age of 16 years is able to consent to their own medical treatment without the need of parental permission or knowledge. So what is the legal age where the child is considered to be an adult? Anyone? What is the legal age when we consider the children to be adults? It is 18 years. Yes, it is 18 years in India also. It is 18 years in whole of UK also. So it includes Scotland, England, Wales, everywhere the age legally, the adult age for legal decisions, your rights of voting, your other rights of property and all that, that comes at 18 years of age. So that is the legal age where the child is considered or where a person is considered to be adult. What is 16 years? Why are we considering 16 years in Gillick's competence? What is the significance of the age of 16 years, especially in the UK scenario? The significance is that they can give their consensus for sexual activity. So after 16 years, it is considered that if the child is having or wants to indulge into sexual activity, it is not considered illegal or it will not be considered wrong. And she has the capability or he has the capability to give their consent for the same. But before the age of 16 years, if the child doesn't want to tell the parents that they want to use contraception or they want to indulge in sexual activities, then is that legal in UK? It is considered legal in UK, and that is what the Gillick's competence is, that before the age of 16 years. And that is the reason of taking this topic here, because of the cultural differences in our country and the UK scenario. In India, you will not have such a possibility. But in the UK scenario, you will have maybe parents coming to you that, I saw a packet of contraceptive pills in my daughter's cabinet, and I don't want the doctor or I don't want you to prescribe her contraception because I think this will encourage her to engage into sexual activities. This kind of scenario you may encounter in the UK scenario, but not probably in the Indian scenario. Nowadays, things are changing, but still, I don't think you will encounter it here. So if the doctor thinks that the child is able to understand or the person is able to understand the significance of what they are doing, then even before 16 years of age, under 16 years of age, also the contraception can be prescribed to the child even without involving the parents. And that is what Gillick's competence is about. So initially, Gillick's competence, it started with contraception, and there was the scenario which happened was that in 1980, the Department of Health issued a circular which said that doctor can prescribe contraception to children below the age of 16 years if doctor feels that they have the competence to understand what they are thinking about or what they are doing. Then in that case, the doctor has the right to prescribe them contraception without involving the parents. But there was one lady called Victoria Gillick. She was a mother of 10-year-old children, and she wanted assurance from the health trust saying that they will not prescribe contraception to their children without her knowledge. When the trust, they refused that no, we cannot do that because already the Department of Health has issued a circular and there is something called Gillick's competence. We cannot do that. We can prescribe contraception to your children if we feel that they are competent enough to understand the consequences of the situation, then we can prescribe them contraception. So she filed a case and with the local court, and the local court took the decision in the favor of Department of Health. So she then went to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals, they took decision in her favor. So then the Department of Health filed a case again and they went to the House of Lords. And at the House of Lords, there were 3 judges who made the decision in favor of Department of Health and not in favor of Victoria Gillick. And these 3 judges, the spokesman of these judges was Lord Fraser. So the Gillick's competence also came to be known as Fraser's guidelines. In fact, Fraser's guidelines is the term which is used over Gillick's competence. And basically, what are Fraser's guidelines? Fraser's guidelines, again, this is something which is very important and you should know about this, that Fraser's guidelines, 5 conditions must be met for the Fraser's guidelines. Number 1, the young person must understand the significance of the advice which is being given to them. So they must understand that if they are being given contraception, what does it involve? And what are the consequences if the contraception fails? What are the consequences that they may have to undergo? So that is number 1, that they should understand the significance of the advice which is given. Number 2, you cannot convince the young person. The doctor should try to convince the young person to involve their parents. If they themselves cannot involve their parents, then the doctor should also suggest that, okay, on your behalf, if you give me permission, then I will talk to your parents. If the young persons don't even agree for that the doctor can also talk to their parents on their behalf, that is the second condition which needs to be fulfilled for Fraser's guidelines to be met. Third is that the doctor feels that even if they do not prescribe them contraception, they are anyway going to go ahead with sexual intercourse. And also, this activity might affect their mental or physical health if they are not prescribed treatment or contraception. So, doctor feels that if they do not prescribe contraception, 1, the young person is anyway going to go ahead with the intercourse. 2, their mental or physical condition health may suffer if they are not prescribed with the treatment or, in this case, contraception. And also, the doctor feels that in the best interest of the young person, the best decision would be to prescribe them contraception even without the parental consent. So if these 5 conditions are met, then you can prescribe them. And this doesn't hold true only for contraception. It also holds true for other things, any medical treatment, this holds true for. So eventually, this was applied for any medical treatment, especially if they don't want their medical records to be shared with their parents. That is another situation which can occur. So, can somebody tell me, besides Gillick competence, if suppose what is the terminology which is used if a young person is asking for medical termination of pregnancy and she's less than 16 years of age? What is that term known as? Something similar to Gillick's competence. This term is known as accent. Sometimes there can be a question on that. There's also terminology called bolum. What do you mean by bolum? So bolum basically stands for the act which was action taken by a doctor. Is it justified or not? So if an activity or an action done by the doctor and the court feels that this is the action which would have been done by majority of individuals belonging to the same category. For example, if the doctor is an SPR, a specialist registered, then majority of SPRs would have taken this action only. Then that action can be justified by the doctor. And that principle is known as bolum. So if suppose the action was taken by the doctor was a consultant, so he would be compared with other consultants, what other consultants would have done. Okay, so this is also sometimes a concept which is asked, and that was all for today's session. If anyone has any questions, I can take it. So I'm getting several questions. Can you explain this Gillick's competence, how it came into action? I'll do that. I'll take a fresh slide. So 1980, Department of Health, they passed a circular which mentioned about the Gillick's. It was not known as Gillick's competence by that time. It was that time they just passed a circular saying that contraception can be prescribed without parental consent to children without involving the parents, parental consent. So there was this lady, Victoria Gillick. She was a Roman Catholic and she was also mother of 10. So she said, no, I don't agree. And she wanted an assurance from her health authorities. So in UK, there are each area will have a trust. So she connected with her trusts and she asked them that you give me an insurance. The trust hospitals, they should give her a assurance that they will not prescribe contraception to her children without her consent. And the trust, they refused to do that. So I think it was Norfolk. I don't remember the name of the trusts, but the trusts, they refused. So she went to the court and she went to the local court. And local court, it's a very funny thing to happen that local court, they took decision in favor of Department of Health. So she went to the Court of Appeals. And the Court of Appeals, they took decision in her favor. in her favor, meaning that the doctor cannot prescribe contraception to a child who is under the age of 16. So now this was against what the Department of Health had issued. So then Department of Health, they filed the case with House of Lords. This must be the legal system in the UK, and these must be the courts of, after local court, probably you go to Court of Appeal and then you go to House of Lords. Like in India, we go to the Supreme Court. If the local courts, we are not satisfied with their decisions. So probably this must be something like that. So House of Lords, they took decision in favor of Department of Health. And in the House of Lords, there were 3 judges who took this decision. So there were several judges, but out of those, 3 took the majority. The 3 judges, they took decision in favor of Department of Health. And there was a spokesperson for these 3 judges who was Lord Fraser. So Lord Fraser, he was the spokesperson, and as a result of this, because Dr. Victoria Gillick had filed this case, this law came to be known as Gillick's competence, and because of involvement of Lord Fraser, this was termed as Fraser's guidelines. Now, is it clear? I hope now it is clear. Okay, then there's another question saying, how is the pass percentage of MRCOG? If you score 50%, is it pass? Okay, let me take another blank slide and explain to you. So they don't have the percentage system. So if you have, suppose 50%, it could, and say 100 people have given the exam, it could be that almost everybody had 50%, or maybe you were just few of those people who had 50%. Maybe out of 100, all 100 could have had 50%, or you don't know. That is the percentage system. But what is followed in the MRCG exam is the percentile system. So usually they follow some 68th percentile, or 50 to 60 is the thing. So out of 100 people, the top 50 or top 60, based on their evaluation, that they normally give, what they say, they normally give the same exam to their students or their medical students. And out of that, how many are the top 50? So suppose they have given their exam, their same exam to their students, and they were top 50 people, they felt that were the ones who attempted it correctly. So then they'll set the percentile as 50. So top 50 they'll take from us also. So they don't follow the percentage system per se, they follow the percentile system. So that is something which you need to remember. Then there is a question saying difference between parametric and non-parametric tests. Let me take another slide and tell you. So it is not very difficult to understand what are parametric and what are non-parametric tests. So parametric tests are those for which you can make assumptions regarding the defining characteristics of the population distribution from which the data is drawn. So assumptions can be made. In a non-parametric test, assumptions cannot be made. So if assumptions can be made, what do you think the data will be having? Data has normal distribution. Because if the data follows normal distribution curve, then you know that the bell-shaped curve and this much would be about 95% within one standard deviation, and within two standard deviation it'll be about 97%, and about three standard deviation would be 99%. So a parametric test is where the data follows normal distribution. The non-parametric, you cannot make assumptions regarding the defining characteristics of the population distribution. So the data does not follow normal distribution in case of non-parametric tests. So that is the basic thing. So parametric tests are basically your student t-test and ANOVA. And the non-parametric tests, they can be your chi-square test. They can be your Mann-Whitney U-test and Wilcoxon rank sign test. So these are your non-parametric tests. Then I also have a question. Axon, I don't think it is less than 14 years. I don't think they specify it also whether it is 14 or 16 years. Some places it is 14 years, some places it is 16 years. Probably I'll search more and I'll get back to you that if it comes in the exam, what should you answer? Should it be 14 or should it be 16? But most likely they'll not ask you the age, they'll ask you what does it stand for. So revision tips I already mentioned to you. So ma'am, regarding peak growth hormone secretion, is it early sleep or deep sleep? I would say deep sleep because that is the time when most of the hormonal secretions they are occurring. So do we have more questions? So gestational age is an interval or a ratio. It cannot be a ratio, no? So to understand different types of statistics tests that I cannot take the entire session because that will be a complete session. I will not be able to do that right now. You'll probably have to, you can go through my book and that details the different, I have given you the general difference. If you apply that to most of the questions, you'll be able to solve it. Because most of the questions would be, you will be able to make out if the normal distribution is being followed or not. And then based on that, you can decide whether it is student t-test, it is chi-square test, it is Mann-Whitney U-test, or it is the Wilcoxon rank test. The student t-test can also be of two types, the paired and the unpaired. So if it is between the same group, it is paired. And if it is two different groups, it becomes unpaired. And most of the questions, they will be asked based on this. I've tried to explain it to you in a very simplified manner because if you apply this also to majority of questions, you should be able to solve it. Till you have more questions, you can put it on in our Telegram group. You can put the questions and I'll try to solve it for you before the exam. And before I take a leave from here, I would like to wish all of you all the very best for your exam and please do very well. And don't get stressed, don't take stress. I'm sure you'll all pass out through great scores.